I'm John Rodgers from Cuyahoga Falls, and this will be sort of a travel log called A Bit of Britain. We'll mostly be in England and in Scotland, but a little bit of Wales. Now, on the map that you're looking at, which is a sort of a 3D type of thing, this is Beachy Head down here. These will be chalk cliffs you'll see in a moment. Here is London, and here's Wales over here, and the ruins of Tinnan Abbey, which I'll show you, are right about in here. We'll go all the way, this is Land's End, we'll go all the way down to here. This is called the North Cornwall coast along here. This will be Tintagel, Bath, and then we will move up. This is the lake country up in here, and we'll move all the way up to Inverness, about in here in Scotland. This is Edinburgh right here, and we will go from there. We're down now, dropping down in the plain to get to England. What you're going to see is sort of a composite of several different trips over there, but much of them will be a 1982 trip that was, I drove the car, there were 4 of us, and we did bed and breakfast that we had set up before we left, going all over this part. We're down now at Eastbourne. This is a tourist spot down on the Atlantic Ocean in the southern part of England. Almost, we're all pretty close to due south from London. Pretty flowers, you'll see a lot of pretty flowers in all of the British Isles, as a matter of fact. And my wife is standing there looking out. We're towards Beachy Head now. That's Eastbourne down there. And over that way is Europe, the rest of Europe. And these are the chalk cliffs at Beachy Head. This chalk extends something, at least 50 miles from Dover on over in England, and it spreads inland across what's called the South Downs. These cliffs that you're looking at now over Beachy Head, these were bristling with the early radar in World War II. And over the South Downs, some of the dog fights and all of the British pilots and the Canadian pilots with the Germans took place over these beautiful rolling downs, they call them. That's Atlantic out there. The lighthouse looks little by comparison, and you get the same effect when you're there. And these are called the Seven Sisters, but I never did figure out the count of 7 for these sisters. And then here's that strange royal pavilion at Brighton, which seems completely out of place in England, but there it is. And then we got really spoiled on our very first bed and breakfast. We had never done any bed and breakfast in this country, and our first home out. That home, and the woman is named Mrs. Webb, and those are her 2 kids. And most of this home was built in 1250 AD. And my wife and I got this room right in here. And what a jewel to be with her. And she asks you at night, well, what do you want for breakfast? And she rattles off all of these things. Well, when do you want it? And so forth. And that's the way it was the entire trip. This is her town, up a beating, and this is on the South Downs, and we will be crossing it. She actually told us which route to go to where we wanted to be. And the South Downs, if you thought England was nothing but people, we went for miles without seeing any people. Fields and all kinds of neat things. And the first place that we were heading for was called the Sisbury Ring. The Sisbury Ring goes back to the Iron Age, and that's about 1100 BC. This is one of the walls, what's left of the wall of the Sisbury Ring. The steps, of course, are new, but here is the ring. And as American Indians came into Ohio to get the beautiful flint of Flint Ridge, so did ancient people come into what is now Sisbury Ring to get the flint. And that's my wife looking out across the countryside, and you can see we're still in the chalk. That's the chalk underlayment of this whole countryside. And if you look to the north, this little group of trees, that one is called Chaunceyberry Ring, and those are copper beeches. I just happen to know that particular little item. But we were able to walk around that place, and then we left, and we were driving by, and the other person, one of the other people with us, yells, "Hey, that looks like an old church." So we went into this church at Fenton, and it goes back to about the 1200s, I think. We were walking around in the churchyard, and the minister came up and asked us to come on in, so we did. It was an Episcopal church, and the people that were with us were Episcopalians, so they were delighted with the whole thing. But the church I was going for was the Winchester Cathedral at Winchester, England. My wife and I had been there before, but it was closed. And so this time we took the time, and we were there during the day, and we got to go inside of the Winchester Cathedral. And Winchester had been walled at one time, and that's one of the old city gates. This is a place that means a lot. It's Cheesefoot Head, and it's sort of a natural amphitheater. And a day or 2 days at the most before D-Day, Eisenhower came to this place and addressed some of the troops, mainly paratroopers as I understand it, right here about 3 miles outside of Winchester at Cheesefoot Head. And you must see and watch some of the thatching. Now this guy is not doing the thatching itself, he is repairing the thatching. Good thatching on a house will last about as long as asphalt shingles. Good thatching will last 25 years. Now that is a postcard, because I have no way of getting up in the air, of Stonehenge. These are the main stones. This is the heel stone. When you get somewhere in here and look through under this lintel and line that up, out on the horizon will be the rising sun on the first day of summer. These are what's called the Aubrey holes. Those they think had to do, that they have been filled with chalk, the white, and they think that had to do with moon eclipses. And then this line out here, this little ridge, these ridges, those were the early parts of Stonehenge, and they think those go back to about 3000 BC. Everything that you see in the picture was except the filling of the Aubrey holes, was in place by about 1800 BC. You've heard of the Druids. Well, the Druids had nothing to do with the construction of Stonehenge. They just used the place later on. Some of these stones, some not the huge ones, but some of the stones here came from about 200 miles away over in Wales, in the Preskelly Mountains of Wales. Can you imagine back there, we call these people barbarians, can you imagine them putting up these lintels? And look at the knob that's carved in the top here to receive a lintel that went across there, the cross pieces. you can no longer walk, as I was doing here, in amongst the stones of Stonehenge. There was too much vandalism, so they had to fence them to protect them. That field in the background, golden, that is rapeseed. You'll see it growing up in Alberta, and now you can actually see some in the northern plains of the U.S. And that is the source of canola oil. Salisbury Cathedral, a big one. Of course, all these cathedrals are kind of big. That's also an interesting one, and it was open that day we were there, and we got to go inside it also. And then we were going out. We're actually heading down towards Plymouth, but we're going to go down through some of the Dorset countryside, and this is Lyme Regis. Lyme Regis has been used in television series and so forth, and it's sort of a neat place. Now you can look over there at those heads. Those are called heads, and they're not that white. They're not that white like we saw at Beachy Head, and we are far enough to the west now, so the lime has really run out. And this is my idea of the Dorset countryside, and I really think that's sort of neat. And then the only thatch roof house that we were able to stay in on the whole trip, it says hotel, and indeed it is, but it used to be a farmhouse. The hotel only has 5 rooms, so we took up 2/5 of the hotel. And then we were finally on our way down towards Plymouth. We got into Plymouth, and we noticed a lot of people in the area, and they were going up towards the high parts of it. And so we went up there, and my wife sidled up to a man and says, "Can you tell me what it is we're actually looking at?" And the man said, "Well, you see these boats out here, that one with the smoke coming from it, and this is a fireboat." He said that is bringing in the survivors from the Sheffield, the sinking of the Sheffield and the Falkland Islands war, you might say. And so they were up there to cheer them on. And then they had a flyby of the Red Arrows, which are a precision Air Force team. But he asked, "Well, what brings you to Plymouth today?" And we said, "Well, we came to see where the Pilgrims left from in the Mayflower on the final stage of going over to the New World." And he says, "Come on down the hill with me." And he shows us this scene, and this is the place from which the Pilgrim sailed. And over at a house there, and I show it in another thing, is a plaque where it shows the different people who sailed on the Mayflower. He said, "You must go into such and such a street, and this building here is the oldest building in Plymouth. Dates back centuries. I don't really even remember how far." And I suppose that most of you have heard of the Pirates of Penzance, and it's a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta, and this is the town of Penzance. And looking across from it is St. Michael's Mont, and I didn't even notice the seagulls until I got home, but they're down there. And then we had somebody who had relatives in this little town. It's spelled Mouse Hole, but they pronounce it Moosel. And the only thing I saw worth taking a picture of was this rock offshore. So we just sort of went on through Moosel and came over into this area. We're now down in Cornwall, and this is some of the countryside. And then over across the road from that were these people dancing around some stones. Those stones go back to about 1300 BC. They are not as old as Stonehenge, but they're dancing, and nobody could tell us much about it. Now, they do put on a play called The Bards of Cornwall later on, and they may have been rehearsing for that, but I just don't know. And then I had seen on the map the Cliffs of Treen, and I had seen only one picture of it, but I thought, man, that's a place to see, and so we did. This lady that you see sitting here, she told us, now when you go on up into England, you must stop at Coventry. We already had it on our schedule to go to Coventry, but she was convinced that that was a spot that you did not miss when you got to England. Notice down in here how clear the water is. Those rocks are many feet below the water. This is the full force of the Atlantic driving in here. And in the foreground you can see some heather right in here. You get to that place by using a public footpath that goes right through a farmer's fields. These public footpaths are all over England, and you are free to walk on them. You are not free to move off of them into the field, but you are free to walk on the footpath without any further permission. We're all the way down at Land's End at Cornwall now. The other lady that was with us asked me where I was hanging to get some of these pictures, because heights bother her. Fortunately, they don't bother me, and so I just take whatever I want. Now, you've probably heard of the nursery rhyme, as I was going to St. Ives, I met a man with 7 wives, etc., etc. There are 2 St. Ives in England. I think this St. Ives is the one they're talking about, but I'm not positive. Those are some of the cabanas along that part, and then moving into the town proper, you get a view like this. Notice the sailing on surfboards. I've forgotten what the name for it is, but that's essentially what it is. And I call him Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Here's some more here. So that is St. Ives. And moving on up the coastline now, we're coming back to the east and moving up on that North Cornwall coastline that I pointed out. And we have come to Tintagel. And Tintagel, now you have to understand, you have to believe that there was such a thing as King Arthur and the Round Table and the Knights of the Round Table. But this is where King Arthur is said to have had his castle. And that North Cornwall coastline is really rugged. There also was a monastery along here too. And you're free to walk all over this place, all that you want. I'd advise against that cliff, but this is my wife coming up from part of the old monastery. And there's the present-day town of Tintagel up on the hill. But there's quite a drop in between here. And between that portion and this portion, there's quite a drop down here. That's the remains of another part of the old monastery. And King Arthur again, that's called Merlin's Cave. Neat place. The weather was just beautiful, the air was clear, just a real neat place. That little model in the background was a model of the old post office. And now we have left Tintagel and we're on our way over to Clovelly. through scenes like this. And then Clovelly, this is a place where you park your car up on the cliffs and you walk into Clovelly. You are not allowed to take your car in. I think some of the locals can by a different road, but you park and then walk down. It's a neat little place to go, still on the north coast, but I think we have moved from Cornwall over to the next area, next county, I guess it is. You can see it's sort of steep down to the water's edge there. And it's low tide. I'm right down at the water's edge, and our car is somewhere back up in there. So we had to fortify ourselves with some ice cream on the way back up, looking at some of the flowers as you go up. Finally getting to the car, huffing and puffing probably, I don't really remember. And we're on our way now to Glastonbury, and there will be Abbey ruins at Glastonbury. And this is where King Arthur is supposed to be buried. See, a lot of these abbey ruins and things of that nature, the English kings wanted to get more revenue, and they weren't getting it. So they would dissolve an abbey, and then they would go in and get the lead out of the roof. That was the most valuable thing. And then, of course, the lead being taken out of the roof, then the whole thing would go into ruins fairly rapidly, except the very, very strong part. And look at the detail of that arch there that stood these many centuries. So the old on the right and the new in town on the left. And our bed and breakfast for that night was at Bath. This is the Rebec home outside of Bath. It's called Beechcroft. And when we got there, it was towards twilight, but the man found out we were interested in history. So he came out to this plant, and he said, come on out before it's too late. So he came out here and he kicked some dirt away, and there's a wall. And he said that wall runs out here, and then it runs in 12-foot squares off of the picture here, back over to the right. And he said there's an old Roman villa under here. Well, of course, the Romans were very active in the Bath area, and you'll see the baths in just a moment. However, if you go into one of these grand cressets, you really better know where your home is, or you could really get mixed up. And here is some of the work of the Romans. Now, when I mention Romans in the British Isles, the Romans left the British Isles by 410 AD. So anything Roman has to be at least that old. And these were the baths. That cathedral, of course, is outside of the bath itself. And that is a lead pipe, which is not allowed anymore. Maybe that's what gave the people some problems back in those days. They were getting too much lead into their system. Again, floral gardens. This is a children's garden. And then a real neat place. This was on a different trip now, this little bit, and this is Figgledian, thatch-roofed homes. We did not stay in a thatch-roof home, but the lady sent us up the street about 200 yards and said they will start there and you must go and see them. She says we have in this area the finest collection of thatch-roof homes in the British Isles. Well, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but they really were beautiful. And lupines, I have trouble even growing one or two, and they just spring up there. Just beautiful thatch roof. This is Clematis. She really had a selection there for us. And then the next morning, we were going to be heading over towards Wales, and we wanted to go to see Avebury. Now these two, we will be going, there's a road out here, we will be going that way. Avebury is over the hill there, about a mile and a half or two. And these stones that you're seeing now, these predate the stones at Stonehenge. These go back to about, I think it's 2300 BC, these stones leading in to Avebury. And yes, we're just about at the same latitude and the same conditions as Flanders Fields over in Belgium. And these are wild poppies. And within Avebury itself, they just sort of built the town in amongst the stones, and some of these stones are really huge. You can see a man right there to give you an idea about how big they are. A lot of people see Stonehenge, but not too many people from the United States I'm talking about, not too many people actually see Avebury. And still working our way, we will be going to one other place before we get to Wales. And this is one of those horses. They're on the hillsides. And there is one on down south also that I've never seen, so I photographed this one. And then our next stop is Castle Combe. Castle Combe was, part of it was used in the photographing of My Fair Lady. But it is a jewel. We just drove all the way through, parked a car, and then walked all the way back through. And just spent time in there that way. It's a real neat place. That's the hotel. We were not staying there. Our bed and breakfast was, that night was going to be a sheep farm over in Wales. Just a real gorgeous little town. Castle Combe. And then we finally got on the main highway then and went over to Wales. And these are the ruins of Tynan Abbey. Wordsworth wrote a poem called Lines Written Above Tynan Abbey. He does not actually mention Tynan Abbey in it. He's talking more about how you were as a kid when you were, well, he used a boy or a lad, in the hills around Tynan Abbey, and how you are as an adult finally coming back to it. And some of the words are, "For I have learned to look on nature, not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still, sad music of humanity." This is the Wye Valley, W-Y-E, and this is the setting for Tynan Abbey. And then in that same poem he said, "Nature never did betray the heart that loved her." Now the people that we stayed with outside of Bath, the Rebecks, had told us that Gloucester Cathedral was the finest of them all, and you must go to Gloucester Cathedral. So we went to Gloucester Cathedral. Now, a number of these pictures that I'm taking, like this one and the last one, you really can't get them without a wide-angle lens because you can't get back any further. I'm back against a wall now, and that wide angle is really necessary to get those kind of pictures. Then we moved on to Oxford. My wife and I had been to Oxford before, This is Christ Church College. There are about, as I recall, there were about 32 colleges that make up Oxford University, and this is the largest of them, Christ Church. But here's one on sort of a main street that the roof line sort of intrigued me. And then we went over to Bladen. Some of us wanted to see, since we're that close, on a tour that we took, we wanted to see Churchill's grave. So it's in this little churchyard here. And one of the people in our group, one of the young ladies, had a rose or carnation, I can't tell, and she tossed it and it landed there. But you look at this grave and you wonder what, you sort of reflect on things. And I did not have these exact words until I got back home and looked them up. But here's a few of the things. You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word: victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. Victory, however long and hard the road may be. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And then when the United States entered the war, Churchill said, after 17 months of lonely fighting, we had won the war. England would live. And then about those pilots of the Royal Air Force that I mentioned over the South Downs in the Battle of Britain. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. And then these words were said first at Fulton, Missouri, right here in the States. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. He called that speech the sinews of peace. Everybody else called it the Iron Curtain speech. And then we got to stay the night in this charming place. This is Mrs. Ross at Ledbury. Actually, she is way out in the country. And so we had dinner with her. Now, she's only responsible for our breakfast, so we had to pay her extra for that. But she cooked duck and all kinds of neat things, and it was really great. And then my wife and I got to sleep in this old four-poster that went back for hundreds of years in the woman's family. So that was sort of neat. Quite a few of these, the bedrooms will have cut flowers in them if you were dealing with the 4- and 5-star bed and breakfast. Stratford-upon-Avon, or Avon, depending on how you pronounce it. This is the home of the lady who married Shakespeare, Anne Hathaway. And it is a beauty. It was an old farm home, and you can see thatch roof. And the beams of the Tudor style are really quite nice. And then in the town of Stratford, this is the home where Shakespeare was born. And would you believe it was pouring down rain when I took that picture, and you don't see a single raindrop in it. And then the town itself is just, if you like Tudor style architecture, it's really a treasure trove. We'll see another one called Chester, another town, but that one is also sort of neat. And out by the river is sort of a park set aside to honor Shakespeare. And then over here in, I think it's called Christ Church, is where Shakespeare is buried. And they ask that you not take any pictures inside there. And then remember that lady down at the cliffs of Treen that told us to go to Coventry. We are now in Coventry, and that is the Lady Godiva statue. And this is the remains of the great Coventry Cathedral. It was bombed out by the Germans in World War II. And off to our left is the new cathedral, but this one will be left as a memorial. And the cross that you see with the cross piece not quite straight is made out of some of the charred timbers from the old cathedral. And now we're going over into Wales. We actually are in Wales now. We won't spend too much time in there. I cover Wales in another show that I do. But here's a little bit of it. We stayed the night at a farmhouse at Ruthin. And there's a little stream, and we're working our way towards Snowdonia National Park. In Wales especially, Wales and Ireland, we claim there are more sheep than there are people. Now this is Snowdonia National Park. All the white that you see in this field, those are sheep. You can't really compare their national parks with ours. They have all sorts of things that we would not have in a national park. But quite beautiful anyhow. And we're making our way out towards Carnarvon Castle, and just a few things on Wales. I did not really see that IRA, the Irish Republican Army insignia on this until I got home. And then I noticed that sheep over to the right standing there too. I thought I was just photographing an old stone building. If you didn't get a look at Heather, this is Heather. Stone fences, stone buildings, they really use the stone. Little lake there. And then we made our way over to Carnarvon Castle. And this is where Charles became the Prince of Wales. I've never actually been in this castle. I've been out to it twice, and always too late in the day, and so we've never been in it. This is Conway Castle, and I just wanted to show a picture of that. And this is one of the suspension bridges that a man named Telford is so famous for in England. He was way before his time in design and actual construction. And that suspension bridge is this one right here. This is the castle right here, and you're seeing the roadway that is now used. And then we move back into England at Chester. Chester is a walled city, and the Tudor architecture in here is really fantastic. If you want to see it, you come to Chester or you come to Stratford-upon-Avon. Now, there are shops all along here on the first floor and the second floor. And so you make your way all through there. We have walked, it's about a 2-mile walk to go around the wall, and we have walked it. Here's one of the gates. And that's an old pub that goes back to the 1400s. Something about the bear. I've forgotten what the name of it is. And then we made our way on to where we were staying that night in Lancashire. And this is Mrs. Sharnock's home. That is a little greenhouse tucked on the back, and the thing that they usually raise in those greenhouses is tomatoes. Because we're fairly high in latitude, so they don't have too much of a season up through here. And then we are making our way, we are right on the edge of the Lake District. This is Wentworth Lake, and we're making our way up to Amblesides in Grasmere, which is where the Dove Cottage is, where Wordsworth lived for a number of years. He never owned Dove Cottage, but he lived there. And this is Dove Cottage. Before we leave Dove Cottage, I'd like to give you just one other verse from Wordsworth. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began, so is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. You can see from this view taken, not more than 100 feet from Dove Cottage, why Wordsworth really liked this area and why so many of the other poets and writers of the British Isles sort of came to the Lake District. There's a little stream running through it, and there's a little cemetery on in there a little ways where Wordsworth is buried. As a matter of fact, in that same Lake District is where Peter Rabbit was invented, and Beatrice Potter spent time there also. And then as we started making our way out of the main part of the Lake District, we would be on the eastern side of it for the night. We saw this scene. A shepherd was bringing a flock of sheep across a field that had other sheep in it, and he had his 2 sheepdogs. And we had never seen them working like that, so it was sort of a joy to stand up there alongside the stone fence and just watch him move across. Notice how barren and how rugged that hillside is behind him. And then we made our way along through here, not much in the way of trees here, and we got over to an area like this, and I want you to look at this stone fence going on up in there, and picture yourselves on a Monday morning starting to build that stone fence. Now, how long is it going to take you to build it? Still some lakes as we make our way to the east. And then we came across another circle of stones, and this one had cows in between it. I don't show any of the cows in this picture, but they'd been rubbing up against the stones, and these stones go back also to the 1300s, a little later than 1300 BC I'm talking about, a little later than Stonehenge. This particular home was not too picturesque, so I took a picture of the fields behind it. Served our purposes quite nicely, but anyhow. And then we went over, this is the ruins of the old Penrith Castle. This was very close to where we were staying. As a matter of fact, we went over that same night. And that lawn is used for lawn bowling. And a bed of snapdragons that just gorgeous. And out in this area, we were going to find Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian was a Roman emperor and built a wall across England just south of what is now the Scottish border. And this was to keep the barbarians out. So a lot of that wall is still visible. And I'm standing on the wall now taking this beautiful view down as somebody is working the fields. And on this kind of country, real neat stuff. So the soldiers that did the patrolling had at least pretty country to look at. Here's some of the remains. And then it turns and goes. And now this is an area where the soldiers would have stayed, come in from patrol and stay here. And you can see the wall stretching on over. That way is towards the North Sea. This and this is the wall. We could not find anybody around. This does not look like it is that old, and so we think it probably isn't, but nobody was there to answer our questions. Then yet another abbey. Part of this one is still being used, but part of it is actually in ruins. And then somewhere, either that picture or that picture, we are in Scotland. Now, I know we are in Scotland on this because this is Melrose Abbey. This was a favorite of Sir Walter Scott. He did a lot of writing around here, and he also went over to the Lake District to see Wordsworth. But one of Walter Scott's ones, "Breathe there the man with soul so dead, who never to himself has said, this is my own, my native land, whose heart hath ne'er within him burned, as home his footsteps he hath turned from wandering on a foreign strand." And then we did not stay in Edinburgh. We stayed just south of Edinburgh at a Mrs. Cockburn's home, and it's in a little town. We've not reached it yet, but the beautiful fields of southern Scotland here that you go through. This is the area where John Paul Jones came from, as a matter of fact. And she lived in a little town, but we are now in Edinburgh. That is Edinburgh Castle on the heights, and this is the famous old fountain down in the gardens. And this is my wife walking here, and this is Mrs. Curry. The couple that were with us were George and Dola Curry from Cuyahoga Falls. And this is the Sir Walter Scott Memorial there that we are walking towards. Beautiful gardens used by people all the time, and the castle up on the heights. The old Scottish guard on his horse. And this is, I am told, the oldest floral clock in the world, right in here. Right up above this sign, right along here, is Princes Street. That's sort of the main drag, you might say, of Edinburgh. And in this little opening here, I think it's every 15 minutes, the cuckoo comes out because it is tied in with the clock. And that's Sir Walter Scott Memorial there. And that's a statue of him. This is St. Giles Church on the Royal Mile. Now the Royal Mile stretches right through Edinburgh from the castle down to the Palace of the Holyrood, where the Queen stays when she's in Edinburgh. But I wanted to tell you just a little bit about Greyfriars Bobby. This is a little dog whose master died, and he came up, and every day he would go into the cemetery and lie by the grave of his master. And somebody fed him. I understand it was a baker fed him. And he did this for years until he died, and everybody in the area knew him and loved him. And so a little memorial has been put up for Greyfriars Bobby, a little terrier. One time we were on a tour in Edinburgh, and this was the view from our window of the castle. Now going up on the castle, this is a memorial building for the people in the armed forces. And I found this in there, but I've since found that it's from For the Falling. And I've never heard anything expressed quite this way. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Then in most of the other buildings, you are permitted to photograph. You cannot photograph in the memorial building. Suits of armor, all kinds of neat stuff. And that's the Firth of Forth, that body of water that's on ahead of us. And there's a memorial park down where one of the towers is, and This is sort of looking across Edinburgh. Now we're up at the castle looking down to the area where we were before, and it is a weekend now, and people are laying all over the lawn areas taking the sun. These cannons down here, and I mentioned Prince's Street. This is Prince's Street, where the double-decker buses are and so forth. And just off to the right, out of the picture, is where the floral clock is. And I think this little chapel is called St. Margaret's, if I'm not mistaken, and it doesn't hold many people. I think they say it holds about 15, and this particular day it is raining. One of the guards. And this is the castle of the Holyrood, where the Queen stays, at the far end of the Royal Mile. And these castles really have ornate gates to them. And I think the formation up behind there is Vulcan's Throne or something of that nature. And then we're going on up into Tayside County, and we're going to a hunting lodge at Comray. This is a rather plush hunting lodge. We really had the run of the place, just the four of us. So two young ladies were handling it for the man who owns it. So they said, well, what color room do you want to be in tonight? So I've forgotten what we chose, but we went up there, and there were king-size beds, and the bathrooms attached to each one were roughly the size of our bedroom at home. And the bedroom was just absolutely huge. And the young ladies cooked omelets for us the next morning, which was kind of nice. But that night they had sent us to a hotel dining room to eat, and the prices were out of this world. We got up and walked out and went to the local fish and chip shop and ate fish and chips that night. But these are scenes now on the way up to Inverness on in northern Scotland. Not northernmost Scotland, but northern Scotland. But quite often you will have those dark clouds hanging. Whether or not it rains, they will be hanging there. That's a salmon stream. We stopped to get some coffee or tea and shortbread. We got in the habit of that. And it gets around your middle, that shortbread. It's pretty good stuff, but it's a little fattening. Now you have to look a little bit at this scene, because from that point all the way back here, all of this is water. Those are all reflections in it. It almost looks like the Hound of the Baskervilles should be baying out there somewhere, but of course that took place down in England. I almost got blown off the bridge when I went back to take this picture. And finally, Inverness. This is the castle at Inverness. They had a bagpipe playing. And yes, my wife and I have gone through the ceremony of the haggis, and we have eaten haggis in Scotland, not on the particular trip where I was driving, but on a previous trip. These are the two church spires at Inverness, and this is the start of the Caledonia Canal. This will lead to off to the right, and we will go into Loch Ness. And then looking across the river, there's the ruins of another castle. They're all over the place. We were just amazed. And this is Loch Ness. This is where Nessie is supposed to reside. And it's a beautiful lake, and the drive along it was quite nice. But no Nessie. The 1934 picture that is supposed to be the one of Nessie was just off of this, somewhere out in this area. That's a long time ago to never have seen it again. You sort of wonder if somebody concocted something, as they are given to do. Now we're at Fort Augustus, and these are some of the locks. Now remember, I said the Caledonia Canal, so you go all the way down Loch Ness, and you get to here, and you have to go to a different level, so you have to use locks. The locks also will, for a time, close off the roadway, so you can do some shopping. My wife bought a woolen sweater there. And looking back, that is Loch Ness out there. And then there's one of the ships off to the left that is, I don't know if you call them a ship, a boat, that has come through the locks and is making its way on the Caledonia Canal. We're heading south now. A lot of sheep. This is Loch Lochy, and we passed by that and then stayed at this place that night. If you're not familiar with the monkey puzzle tree, which you can see in the American Northwest, this is one of them right in front of the home there. And that's the loch right in front of that place. It's Loch Lynn. And now we're going to see a few waterfalls and moors on the way to Loch Lomond. And of course, everybody knows about Loch Lomond by yon bonny banks and by yon bonny braes. And this is part of Loch Lomond. It's a little, it's not raining, but it's awfully close. This is Loch Lomond. And if you hear the word Ben Lomond is a mountain, and there is a mountain right close by called Ben Lomond. But it's much prettier, I think, than Loch Ness, because it has these little islands and it has a twisting, turning shoreline and all. It makes it much more interesting than Loch Ness. And then from a previous trip, on the other side of Loch Lomond is a town called Luss, L-U-S-S, and it had some pretty flowers, and I always like to show these delphinium here alongside the roses. There's a little bit of flare, light flare at the bottom, but look at the size of those delphinium. And then we've made our way down to Dumfries, and we're in the Robert Burns country now. And that is a statue of him on this circle, or as they say, a roundabout in Dumfries. And maybe you remember this one. But Mousey, thou art not alone, and proving foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes of mice and men often go astray. And that's where he lived. And from Carter's Saturday Night, O Scotia, my dear, my native soil, for whom my warmest wish to heaven is sent, long may thy hardy sons of rustic toil be blessed with health and peace and sweet content. And he was the one that at a little mausoleum here, that's where he's buried. He was the one that when he was in church one time on this, he was behind this very prim and proper young lady, and he sees a little louse crawling. I don't think it was on her neck, but it was across her collar. And that's when he wrote the part about, O wad some gift the gifty gie us, to see ourselves as others see us. And we're out now, and I mentioned this country when we were going up. This is the country from which John Paul Jones came. And we spent one night in this countryside at Mrs. Hogg's home, and that was kind of neat. And now we're back into England in the Yorkshire country. This is the country of James Harriet, the veterinarian. It's pretty stuff. You can see why he likes this area. And then when you have your towns in this kind of country, you have your countryside and it stops and there's the town. The other side of town, you have the countryside. You don't have the sprawling out like we do in this country. This is Alston Village here. And we're moving across the Yorkshire Downs. And I went up, the road is down off to the right, and I went up to this high part, and it's almost like sponge. I got back down and my feet were soaked, even though I was up in high country, which you think would drain. We're out in the area now by the Kilhope Wheel, and this is a historic wheel that they have renovated, much like we would call it a National Historic Monument or something of that nature. That's what it is. That's a 30-foot wheel, and this little plant was used in extracting lead because lead was so valuable. The Kilhope Wheel. Durham County and the North York Moors is all what we are going through now. Over there are the Cleveland Hills. This is said to be the favorite ruins of James Harriet. I call it the Reval Abbey ruins. It's spelled R-I-E-V-A-U-L-X. And I was taking these pictures, and a local lady saw me, and she came over and she said, now, before you leave here, you're in your own car, aren't you? I want you to go out this road and you turn, and then you look back, and then you get a good view of that. And that's the view that she got me to go to. And of course, I have a telephoto lens, so I can really pull it in. And it's really it's hard to say that ruins are beautiful, but those ruins are really beautiful. And then we spent the night at a farm place and came into this little pub to eat that night, and then I photographed it the next day when we were going through. It's in a little town called Hovingham. And that's another view of it, the back. Well, I don't know whether this is the back or the front of it, but the malt and shovel is what it's called. And then we stopped here. There was some old ruins here. This is in Sheriff Hutton, and this is another one of those public footpaths. And you can see some cows out there, and I went around it. But look at that wall, just still standing after all of these years. I think those cows were smarter than I was. It was raining, and they did get inside, and there is a room that they could roam all the way in. And finally, we're down at York, and this is the Minster. And we heard the choir rehearsing here and the organ playing. It was quite a nice experience. They had a fire in the Minster after I took these pictures. I think it was a couple of years afterwards, but this is what it looks like inside. And we heard, we were back over by the organ when we heard the choir rehearsing. And that's the outside. And we went across this place to eat, and there was a sign there saying that the Queen had passed here at such and such a time. And York also was a walled city, and I am up on the wall looking back towards the Minster. Notice the flowers there. And then I got down off of the wall and took a picture of one of the gates of the wall. And then we spent the night at this place. It's out at Clay Cross, home of the Flints, and wonderful gardens. The vegetable garden in back was as picturesque as the garden in front of flowers. Just a real delightful place to stay. Really neat. And he sent us across to where he had worked before. He'd worked in a pub, and we saw these pictures, but his pub that he was sending us to was not open. So we had to find other places to go, which we did. And then we went to Newark-on-Trent, and these people back in here are actors in a television series that they were putting together. Newark-on-Trent. And then we were over into the U.S. Cemetery at Mattingly outside of Cambridge. The land for this was provided by Cambridge University. And I'm standing with my back to a little chapel, and this wall over here has the names of the people whose bodies were not recovered, like sailors that went down. And the white crosses there. And then here's my wife looking at some of those names. The flag down there, under the flag are beds of peace roses. And in the little chapel, on this wording that you see on there, reads this way: in proud and grateful memory of those men of the United States Army Air Force who from these friendly isles flew their final flight and met their God. They knew not the hour, the day, or the manner of their passing. When far from home, they were called to join that heroic band of airmen who had gone before. May they rest in peace. It seems sort of strange to have instruments of war on the door of a chapel, but that's what it is. And there's one of those peace roses under the flag at the far end of the area. Going on in then into Cambridge University, this is the campus called Magdalene. This is set up just like Oxford. 30 some odd colleges make up Cambridge University. This is that same one. I'm not sure how they pronounce it. Magdalene is the way I pronounce it, but I don't think they pronounce it the same way. And then over at St. John's, and yes, they do pronounce that the same way. This is one of the larger ones. And I think we're at Trinity now. And this is punting on the cam. Punting is using those long poles and sort of poling yourself along. And the cam is the name of the river. This is Trinity. This is Trinity. I was amazed. Some of their flower beds actually had weeds in them. They really needed to take care of them. That's unheard of in England. And then this is King's College. We were actually leaving at this time, and here's sheep in the field, and then the King's College Chapel across the way. Quite often you'll hear a service from there on Christmas Eve. And we, just south of there is Grand Shelford, where we were spending the night. And this is the Hawley home. And we got there and we asked the young, well, there were two young people, a boy and a girl, and we asked them if they knew where the Masons lived, because Grand Shelford is not very large. And they said, oh yes, their property comes up to ours. You just go here to the corner and go about 100 yards and that will be their place, in renovated barns. And that's where a nephew of mine lives. And so we went there that night and had a few hours with them before going on down to London the next day. And these are in Kew Gardens. Kew Gardens also needed a little work. These are lily pads about 6 feet across, very strong, said to be able to hold quite a bit of weight. In the houses there, a few orchids. And then a little bit of Windsor Castle, and that is Queen Victoria, the statue there. Still at Windsor. And then we went out to a little place called Stokes Pogies. Not yet, this is still Windsor. Let me get us out to Stokes Pogie before I start talking. Now we're at Stokes Pogies. And this is a little churchyard. This is the setting for Sir Thomas Gray's poem, Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. Now I'll just give you a couple of the verses from it. The boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth there gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The paths of glory lead but to the grave. And then one of the others, well, let me tell you first, right in here is where Sir Thomas Gray is buried. He speaks of yew trees in the poem. These are yews, these are huge yews. One more verse from it. Full many a gem of purest ray serene, the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bear. Full many a flower is born to blush unseen, and waste its sweetness on the desert air. That's one of the old gnarled yew trees. And what he's driving at is that these are rustic people. These people, maybe they didn't go too far, but they never shed blood, never caused blood to be shed across their lands like some of the others and so forth. So don't judge them harshly. And then we're at Mrs. Brown's at Whittam, and this is where we stayed, northeast of London. We stayed here 2 nights. She apologized for having to have us in the house because the white part is a mill. But the house only goes back to the 1600s and the mill goes back to the 1400s. And then we were in in London. This is the Thames, and this is Big Ben, this is Parliament, and somewhere back in here I thought I saw them with the towers of, some of the towers of Westminster. But that's Big Ben. That's Westminster. Westminster can really be jammed by we tourists sometimes when you're in there and it's hardly room to move. Now, while I have the statue in this area of Churchill on, I just want to give you his words from June 18th, 1940 as sort of a remembrance, and you may recognize him. What General Weygand called the Battle of France is over. I expect that the Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the light of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties and so bear ourselves that, If the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour. These people at Buckingham Palace waiting to get in to a garden party. But the reason for the wait is security, because 2 days before there was a bombing and one of the guards of the Queen was killed in one of the parks there in London. But the Queen's flag is flying over Buckingham, so that means she is in residence. And remember, I talked about at the Holyrood Palace, the ornate gates. They're just as ornate here at Buckingham. And this is one of the Queen's own guards. And it was one of these people that was killed, and the horse was killed also in that bombing. And over at Trafalgar Square, Nelson is at the top of his column. Tower Bridge at sunset, and that's the church, the Christopher Wren Church, some people call it. That was in that. This is it here. That was in the photograph that really looks like the Blitz, with the smoke and floodlights and all around it. Tower of London. A lot of people, royalty and so forth, got killed in that tower. This is Flowers, fairly close to Buckingham Palace. As a matter of fact, a building in the back is where the Queen's Guards stay. Now, as we lift off and you see a little church in the middle, I want to use one last thing. This was a Shakespeare, and Shakespeare put these words in the mouth of John of Gaunt. This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden, demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection and the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall or as a moat defensive to a house against the envy of less happier lands. This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England. And the last slide is over the United States. That's over Lake Ontario.